Okay, taking a listen.
Is essential to any military campaign. Black people tend not to understand propaganda. And the reason why we tend not to understand propaganda is because the propaganda channels, the mediums, the conduits, the radio, the television, the newspaper, we tend to just treat as forms of entertainment. We don't see them as military strategy. When there's a movie depicting black people in a negative image, when there's caricatures in the newspaper making jokes about black people, we tend to just see it as political entertainment. We don't see it as laying the foundation before the storm. That's exactly what they did in Wilmington. You always seek to create a context that allows your military campaign to be acceptable. There's always context. You study Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. He had a propaganda campaign that lasted over a year before he began to physically oppress the Jews. He had to make sure that the national mindset had been conditioned to accept the extermination to come. In Wilmington, North Carolina, the same exact thing happened years before Nazi Germany. Through the magazines, through the radio, through word of mouth, through stage play, they created negative images of black people in the minds of white folk in case there were any liberals who would have been against what they were going to do. They were slowly able to reform their opinion by constantly repeating negative information about the target population. See, the one thing about the brain that we got to understand is the creature of repetition. Whoever has the most access to the brain rules the brain. It's all about volume, not quality. The more you tell people that a certain group of people are no good, the more you show images, the more you show sounds, song, poem, dance, projecting negative information about a people, sooner or later the subconscious begins to get conditioned automatically, because you can't turn off the subconscious to what it sees and what it hears. Sound and image, you cannot stop it except to stay away from it. So sound and image are critical to any propaganda campaign because they help lessen the defenses of anyone who may be against what you're trying to do. It's the same thing happening right now. There is a direct assault on the image of the black man and woman internationally. So when mass incarceration, homicide takes place, nobody cares what's happening to black folk because they've already been conditioned to believe that these people are better off dead anyway. So propaganda is the first stage of military warfare. Right now, we're being set up for another extermination campaign. It's going to be worse than what went on in Wilmington, Tulsa, Charleston, Rosewood. It's going to be worse. Whenever the propaganda gets worse, then you know the extermination is going to be that much worse, because you see how far the exterminator had to go in order to condition the people to prepare them for the carnage to come.
Whoa. That is deep. And here's the quote. The propagandist's purpose is to make one set of people forget that certain other sets of people are human. The propagandist's purpose is to make one set of people forget that certain other sets of people are human. Deep, deep, deep. As they would say, plain talk, bad manners.
The Strollers present Fuddy Mears, a dark, absurdist farce about all that is imperfect and flawed in the human condition. Come see it at the Bergdorf Center for the Performing Arts on 10 Durand Road in Maplewood. Friday and Saturday performances are on March 6th, 7th, 13th, and 14th at 8 p.m., with a Sunday matinee on March 8th at 2 p.m. Visit thestrollers.org for tickets and details. Don't stay at home. Come play with the Strollers.
We are back with you. It's in the village today in Summer Marjorie on the South Orange Maple Online Radio Experience. Coming to you every Monday through Friday from 8 to 9:30 p.m. That's 8 to 9:30 p.m. You can reach us here at 973-327-3626. That's 973-327-3626. Now, many of you may know or may not know of Michelle Alexander. And she was on Democracy Now! If you don't watch or listen to Democracy Now!, please, ladies and gentlemen, listen to Democracy Now! You can learn quite a bit of information that you're not going to get on Fox. You're not going to get on MSNBC. You're not going to get on CNN. You're not going to get on ABC, CBS. You're not going to get on the local media. Did you just hear what Dr. Umar Johnson said? He just told you about propaganda. Propaganda. A lot of the information you get on many of these stations are propaganda because they want to condition your mind to think a certain way. You see, Dr. Umar Johnson is so right. We look at these movies and we look at it as a movie. But another person looking at the same movie looks at it, especially a movie where the depiction of black people are always in a negative light. Other people look at it like if it's real. They don't look at it as a movie. They look at it as what if it's real. So when we keep bombarding you with all these negative images, eventually you start to believe these things. So here is Michelle Alexander talking about what black parents have to tell their children about the criminal justice system. Let's listen to well-renowned Michelle Alexander talking about what black parents have to tell their children about the criminal justice system. Let's listen.
We're joined by Michelle Alexander, civil rights advocate, author of the best-selling book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. She's a law professor at Ohio State University. Her New York Times op-ed in November was titled, Telling My Son About Ferguson. Welcome back to Democracy Now!
I'm happy to be here.
It's great to have you with us. I know you're giving 2 major addresses here in New York at Union Theological Seminary tonight and then Friday night at Columbia University. But let's start with that op-ed. What did you tell your son about Ferguson?
Well, it's difficult, as a mother to have to tell your son, my 10-year-old son, that I knew that the officer who shot Michael Brown wouldn't be charged. And I knew it before the grand jury came back. I knew it before the Justice Department announced that it wouldn't be filing charges. I knew it because police officers are almost never charged for killing unarmed black men. And that's the way it is in this country. And it was incredibly difficult to tell him that, and I found as I began to talk to him about the realities of race and justice in America that I was tempted to lie. I was tempted to say, no, really, nothing like that could ever happen to you, son. And yet, unfortunately, today, in this current era, a time of so-called colorblindness, the age of Obama, parents have to have conversations with their children that are eerily reminiscent of the kinds of conversations parents had to have with their kids decades ago. And so it's my hope, really my prayer, that the uprising we saw in Ferguson is the beginning of a new, bold, radical, courageous movement for justice that will ensure that, parents in the future don't have to tell their children that in the eyes of their law, they don't matter.
When you talk about parents having to have these conversations with their children, notably here in New York City, the mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, discussed that very issue in the midst of the Ferguson protests about having to have a conversation with his biracial son about watching out for interactions with police. And he took enormous heat and enormous attacks by the local police union over even daring to talk about that. I'm wondering your reaction when you heard about that.
The truth isn't popular today. Yeah. That's the reality. And I think, though, what we've seen, in recent months is the necessity of telling the truth. I look at what's gone down in the last few months, and it seems clear to me that, first and foremost, change comes when people stand up, speak unpopular truths, and are willing to take real risks in the name of justice. There is no way that the Justice Department would have investigated what was going on in Ferguson, if the young people there hadn't stood up and taken to the streets. And what the Justice Department report demonstrates is that we're not crazy. The young people in Ferguson, the old people in Ferguson who said, we feel like we're living in occupied territory. We're telling the truth. We have some sense now, based on this report, of why Michael Brown might have been so frustrated and so angry when he was being harassed by the police for jaywalking. Get some sense of what's really going on in these communities. And so, we're not crazy. There is a system of racial and social control in communities of color across America. And if we don't stand up, speak unpopular truths, take to the streets and organize, things aren't going to change. But, what we see now is that we do have the power to make things change. And the question is, are we going to transition from protest politics to long-term strategic movement building?
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Michelle Alexander. It is very. The people are not crazy. I think the days when black folks just make stuff up is long gone. Those days are behind us. Most of the times when you hear people complaining about different things happening, it's because it is. Now, let's listen to someone from the Justice Department talking about systematic racism. Let's take a listen to that. Let's listen to that.
What do you think of the court system here?
Poor, disrespectful, rude, not fair. Yep, I call them racist.
After Mike Brown was killed, the town needed some political capital. Ferguson needed some political capital in order to go to the people and say, trust us, give us some time, be patient with us. We're going to get to the bottom of this, and we're going to figure out what's going on. And our clients and many people in the region feel like these are the same people now asking us for trust are the people who have been pulling us over because we're black and exploiting us because we're poor for 50 years. You can typically expect to see predominantly black folks in the court as defendants, as pro se defendants, and predominantly white people who are the judge, prosecutor, and police officers.
Tonight you had about, I can count, about 2 or 3 whites, all the rest is blacks.
People trying to get this stuff taken care of, warrants, old warrants or whatever, and then they got to come out and stand in the cold. That's not right. They ain't gonna give no hot chocolate or nothing, Yeah, this is a house here. That's unprofessional.
All the money they making,
for real.
Did you say they had like 300 warrants, traffic warrants out?
Oh no, more than 30,000.
3,000?
No.
5,000.
30.
Are you serious?
3,000. This is the worst thing.
Right here. And this is a small municipality. How the fuck they got 33,000 warrants out?
The courts are often the second highest source of revenue for their town. Ferguson, for instance, it's $2.7 million a year they make on their courts. Others, it's even more than that.
I think all these small municipalities need to be investigated. I just found out that this municipality alone has 33,000 warrants issued when there's only 1,200 people that populate the area.
They literally sit on the street and wait till they find something to pull you over for. So they're definitely